91, take one. Hello, this is Jim Schaefer, executive producer and host of Rip Rap, the academic book television program. My guest today is Randy Baier. Today we'll be discussing scholarly research that we have decided to examine. Welcome to Rip Rap, Randy.
Glad to be here. Yeah, once again.
What we should do first is go to this book, David Weinberger's Everything is Miscellaneous.
It's a good title.
Which applies, it fascinates me about digital disorder. People assume that technology is very rational, very easy, but I don't think that's true.
Well, the subtitle here is The Power of the New Digital Disorder. I wonder what that power is. Everything is miscellaneous. It's interesting.
Well, go
ahead.
What they're finding is that the premise is that technology is ordered, but it gets to in certain kinds of situations, it's not as disorder. Something I haven't thought about as much as I probably should is that I think chaos theory might work to understand how technology works in our culture, because chaos theory has to do with expecting the unexpected. That you watch how the thing operates rather than with preconceived structures.
Notions about what the structure should be. Right.
When I look at it that way, that implies that you're still engaged philosophically and pedagogically with what's going on. There's a deeper thing there, and what I've seen people do is pretty superficial. It's like what you're talking about, the social network. Oh, this is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But as an educator, I'm very concerned about, well, what is going on? But on the other hand, there is that chaos theory thing of observing the dynamics of phenomena that are happening, and what can we learn from that?
Yeah.
And I still, I think this book is kind of along that way of saying, we really don't know as much as we think.
Yeah.
And that it can easily turn what you know into miscellaneous or non-ordered.
It's interesting. We're completely off. We're on topic by being off topic. I was at a conference last week on digital humanities, and one of the folks, I think he was working in one of the University of Texas, had done an algorithm using a series of algorithms using an old program called Lisp, which is an artificial intelligence kind of program from one of the first ones, 60s and 70s, maybe even earlier. He had rewritten, or he re-scenarioed Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And he put in a series of intentions and verbs and adverbs and terminology, some, large number of terms, and then a program that would result in outcomes. And it was sort of psychological, intention and meaning. And so he took the one scene where Frankenstein, the monster, wakes up and becomes alive. And then there's this, in the original, Frankenstein is kind of horrified by what, Dr. Frankenstein is horrified by what he's created. And so he kind of rejects the monster, but the monster's, just the monster. Isn't good or evil necessarily, but, excuse me. At any rate, he takes that scene and runs it through the program. And it's really interesting because, for instance, there will be an expression of something on the face of Dr. Frankenstein when he sees the monster wake up for the first time. But the monster now has some consciousness and reacts to what he thinks Frankenstein is expressing in that expression. And so he read them out. He generated about 15 different scenarios, all based on different intentions. Based on, Frankenstein appeared cold to the monster, and the monster didn't know why this was the case. And as a result, he felt somewhat hostile towards Frankenstein. And then he wrote it differently, And it was, can you write literature this way? His whole program was based on, can we learn something about writing and the inventive mind by creating artificial scenarios through a computer that would generate based on rules of syntax and adverbs and these sort of linguistic things. So he was reflecting both on the process of the programming and the actual results, the literature, quote unquote, the literature that came out of the result. Just on that scene. It was, there's no final answer. The question, you got some reactions like, well, how can you do this to literature? And then there's the great mind theory. It was Mary Shelley's mind that created a story. And the reader brings agency, the creator, the writer, and Mary Shelley brings agency. What's going on? Is there the one story, or are there many, or are all these intentions part of what might just go on in a reader's mind about different ways of seeing the story? And that gets back to your chaos theory in a way, in some ways. I don't know. There was no, there was method to it, but there was no final
it's
result.
releasing the possibilities of the way it could go that you hadn't anticipated.
Yeah.
The actual literature on what she did, living with Lord Byron, is quite interesting because there's other stories and novels she wrote with this sort of bizarre thing, but she had a very specific point that she was making in these. Having this disheveled male figure emerge from a male figure.
Yes. Okay.
And so. But it's useful to play around with that to find out, well, what other reactions or conditions would you respond to in your own situation?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. There's the gendered Mary Shelley story. There's that's very true. I mean, there's this, I guess I could say the social factors of her particular life and relationships and the gender of the doctor and the monster.
I mean, it functions on a level of surrealism.
Yeah.
And it's wicked fun. There's other authors that like the story of the yellow wallpaper, where my students, it's in the student's reader, and they often misread it because it isn't that the wallpaper is so alive to her. She is having a very surrealistic moment where she's so confined in essentially in the throes of postpartum and being repressed that things start having an aliveness that is abnormal, and clearly abnormal, and in her mind she knew it was. But this is where the secondary literature really helps you see the complexity.
Yeah, right. That's
and right. I wish they would do more of that with the technology. So this other book we almost got to, Accountable, Making America as Good as Its Promise. And it has an extraordinary cover of all these images that reflect Barack Obama.
Right, the many faces of America merging with this computerized imagery program, merging thousands of faces into one. It reminds me of the paintings by Chuck Close. He does something like this with painting.
See, I just fundamentally don't know how they do that.
Yeah,
There's got to be very clever computer thing. This is one time when technology really can help.
Well, it's interesting. It's sort of like painting by, instead of painting by numbers, it's painting by mini photographs, because each of the individual images have color and line and shape, and yet when you stand back from Obama's face, when you look at it far away, it's like pixels suddenly merge together, and there's shape and line and color. And so the individual small pictures match up with those aspects of the larger picture. And it is pretty fascinating how this is done. But the image is very telling in terms of the representation of, not only is the president accountable, but it's, in a sense, we're all accountable to the promise of America, whatever that is. I mean,
based on what the people see in him.
Yeah, I shouldn't say whatever that is, but the democratic principles where everyone has a voice and has the same access to I don't know, the bigger principles, right?
What I thought was
Happiness,
fascinating
warmth,
is that
food.
famous people, celebrities, seem to have this separate quality. People set them off.
Mm-hmm.
What I think this book is pointing out is that we're a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's also an
Well, if we
extension.
don't know that, we're if we don't know that yet, we are in trouble. But you're right; it's good to be reminded of that. That's very true. We are part of that.
People voted for Barack Obama, and people voted for, or supported the idea of health care, national health care system. I mean,
Right.
they desperately need it.
Right.
As it's being implemented, as we were talking about before, there's a lot of problems, but that's not because it's not a worthy notion.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it's so complex. And like
Mm-hmm.
we were talking about before, if you're ordering something on Amazon, it's a one transaction kind of thing. You identify something, you put it in the cart, you go through the cart thing to buy it, and then you purchase it, and it's sent to you.
Right. It's very discreet, isn't it?
Yeah. But
Yeah.
with healthcare, there's all these elements that have to be decided. What's your income level? What's the size of your family? What's your age? What's your, all these
State
different
of your
things.
health at this
Yeah.
particular point in time.
Well, they can't deny you, but on
Right.
the other hand,
Right.
it's
But they need to know in
Yeah.
terms of the.
And then where do you live?
Yeah.
And who's participating?
Yeah.
And
And do you have a job that can
based
cover
on age,
part of this?
are you in Medicare, Medicaid? That's
Yes.
another
Right.
factor that I've read, that there's some issues where people were put into the Medicare aid thing, and
They're in their 40s or
they
something.
weren't supposed to be
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
And so there is this issue of accountability, but I just wish that people overall would take on accountability for their actions instead of just
Mhm.
zooming along the highway of life, but this is a thing also about leadership.
Mhm.
If you're going to propose these things, then, and in his second term, Barack Obama, who had a very well-defined idea about what he was supposed to be doing, is suffering a lot because some of his ideas were very, very good, but they were so good that it's taken a lot to develop them.
Or maybe overcome the complications of that idea being such a change from
all of
the
that.
past. Perhaps I can't think of one immediately, but trying to actually wrap the healthcare beast into a usable package, because we're so different from many of our peers, in the world where healthcare is working, and it's some peculiarity about this nation, this the United States, the way the United States works, that it seems like we've gotten so, I hate to throw out cliches, but individualistic, capitalistic, corporate, that profit drives everything, that we've lost a sense, and I think that's part of this national debate,
Yeah.
we lost a sense of common good. And it is true. I mean, some countries are spending 50% of their income on taxes, but it's going across the board for everyone. So that
Well, exactly.
there's an equality there that isn't found in our country.
Well, we
really.
talk about the common good and worry about the individual good.
Yeah.
And so when you get into a system that it really is going to help everybody, there's a real crisis, just philosophically
Yeah.
and morally and psychologically. And that's what we've been running into. And I think you could also argue that those who have cultural or social economic benefits are not real enthusiastic about sharing the wealth,
Mm-hmm.
literally and figuratively.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's complicated. For example, the misinformation that was going on about people were getting letters from the healthcare provider saying that they're going to have to close down their healthcare
Yeah.
program, mainly because it was so inadequate. And then they gave some outlandish figure for what they would reinsure them at. Well, if these people would apply, they could get not only a better healthcare thing, but it would may even be subsidized, so they'd be paying much less. That seems to have been lost. So people are infuriated about this, what they call Obamacare, national health care thing, needlessly, because they simply have not informed themselves, they haven't got the information about how it works.
Mm-hmm.
It's a horrible problem. And there's been different groups that have exploited this fear and anxiety, which I think is normal to any major change. But yeah, so I also read just, I think it was yesterday, that Obama's changing his team, his administrative group, moving people around, bringing new people in like Podesta and others, because some of these people are simply getting worn out. They've been working 14-hour days, 6, 7 days a week.
Trying to get it moving.
And these are issues of substance. So I have to admire people that really believe in what they're doing, but there is a point of humane concern. It's not going to help if someone just gets burned out.
Right.
So I mean, the kind of change they're talking about is huge, and I still don't think people really realize the magnitude of the change that they're in the middle of. They're supposed to be signed up by the end of this month or no later than March 15th of next year, but still, it's a huge number of people. It's somewhere maybe 100 million people involved.
Yeah.
That's a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But that's to me in sort of an odd way, like we were talking about before, that the usual computer systems can handle a certain amount. This is way past anything that I've ever seen. Way past.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of watching the technology, which everyone assumes can do it. I mean, they've had to bring more servers. They
Sure.
have to reprogram things.
Well, the critique side of that is that they knew that beforehand. I mean, the part of I think there is some blame, but it gets too political, this blame. I don't want to hear about the blame. I want them to fix it so it works. But it sounds like part of the mistakes that were made was that some kind of lack of planning, where they didn't account for the fact that they would need massive servers.
Well, I think
they've got a national government with a place like the National Security Agent. The spy wing of our national government has access and planning on computer systems that do phenomenal amounts of data manipulation. So the capability to plan that is there. Somehow it didn't get managed into this, because it's not rocket science to know that you're going to be, it's rocket science to finish the project, I guess, but it's not rocket science to know that you're going to get hit by millions of people if you're trying to, realign the whole healthcare system.
If you think of it in terms of an Amazon.com transaction,
it isn't the same.
It's not.
No, I think that's a good.
I think that's
point.
part
Right.
of this giddy, rosy illusion, is that it was going to be that simple. No. You're talking a very complex filtering process of sorting out all the different applicants.
Yes, right.
And their complexity.
It's almost like when you're doing, you can think of something analogous to the tax programs. There's got to be these algorithms in there that are telling you can do this or you can't do that. So the accountability is what you're making me think about here, is the whole system of the press as well. That's part of this. The message from the government, the response by institutions like healthcare systems and whatnot. But there's also this whole aspect of how we, as a nation, hear about it. Who filters it to us and explains it to us?
There's the rub, because you have 6 media companies now, and they're the ones that control the flow of information.
Yeah.
And while I've noticed a fair amount of flow, like in newspapers, of inserts in newspapers explaining it, but then when I try to understand it, it's not easy to understand.
It's not, right.
You're thinking, what?
Right. Let's break it down. Yeah,
and
USA Today, let's do it USA Today style.
And they always break it out, they always end up saying, contact the website. Well, that's not real helpful.
Right, the website
because they need a book in order to really work through it.
Yeah.
And in this era of, dummy books, they could very well publish a dummy book on how to do but the timeline is so short.
I'm susceptible to this as well. I mean, I'm a radio listener, and you know, I don't spend hours reading through 5 different newspapers and academic analyses of these things constantly. You have to really be, I guess, you know, well read and interested to dig into this, to spend some time. So what do? I or others rely on people reporting it to us and trying to, you know, lay it out on NPR every night. You know, how does it work? So you're susceptible to that.
Well, I have to confess, I have even gone on the website and gave up. You think,
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
You know?
Right. So actually, one aspect of the accountability, you know, argument from, I think this book talks about. Yeah, the Ted Smiley book is, in a sense, our own responsibility, but also the institutions that we have in our culture, in our you know, national dialogue that are responsible to telling us, to interpreting. It's fine to be an interpretation, but to, you know, give us something that's truthful.
Well, I think underneath all this is the need for, I don't know if you call it computer literacy, but some kind of level of competence in negotiating the technology. Because I still have students that don't know how to use Microsoft Word.
Well, that could be me too.
And don't know much about computers. They use computers, they rely on them,
Yes.
but they really don't know them. And then there's also just standard reading literacy, which is pretty low in this country.
Yes. Yeah.
And so people are getting this vast wad of information, but it requires reading, evaluating, and critical thinking.
Right.
And they're just
Right.
not doing it. So I think it's fascinating in that sense. That's something that Barack Obama was very good at, you know, processing information. And then you realize when you're dealing with a wide swath or range of people, not everyone's at that level of competence.
Right.
And so then you find out very quickly, whoops,
Yes,
there's something
right. You
else
have to
going
work
on
for
here.
the comment. This book, just as a passing comment, is not just about healthcare. It talks about education, racial divide, lots of other critical aspects that lead us to, you know, to the promise, so to speak. So it's talking in interviews and has discussions to bring out.
Well,
all
and there's some
aspects
hot
of these.
issues now about immigration reform.
Yeah, yeah.
there-
And that all gets to the nation, the nature of the nation. You know, you really talk big ideas. I mean, is the promise of, you know, this brand of democracy powerful enough to fulfill itself? I don't know. There's a lot of cynics, but a lot of hope as well. Immigration's a perfect topic. I mean, it's critical.
We just had a woman here in the Detroit area that almost got deported. She's been following all the rules, but there was one rule she didn't follow.
And
so
because she's been up front, and they,
Yeah.
you know,
they were
know who she
actually
is.
on the verge of taking her from her kids and shipping her back to, was it Slovenia? And somebody intervened, and so she didn't have to go. But there's hundreds or thousands of people who have a similar thing that are not. There's not any intervention. So this immigration reform is it's in the magnitude of what, 12 million people are affected. We've got to do something about
Right.
that.
It's another genie out of the bottle in a way. Yeah.
So I want to go to this,
Yeah, let's switch
Big
gears
thing.
entirely here.
which is
You have this tome here.
Yeah.
Look at it. Beautiful book. Beautiful
it's
book.
gorgeous, and I'm going to rely on you to evaluate this, because one of the co-authors or co-editors is Donald Lopez, who teaches at the University of Michigan, and the other one is
Robert Buswell.
Buswell.
Jr.
And I don't know about you, you have more expertise in the library thing, but I have never seen, this is the dictionary, what is it?
This is the Princeton Dictionary of Buddhism.
Yeah,
And there are several dictionaries or encyclopedias of Buddhism, of course. And this is brand new. Covers the major routes of Buddhism and spread of Buddhism. And then I think probably any kind of terminology you could come across from major well-known words like bodhisattva or various invocations of deities, to terminologies that are very specialized, extremely specialized.
Well, there's different books I've
Historical as
gotten,
well.
and this one, I got this one, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is just mammoth.
Yeah,
And it's excellent. I mean, it's just a huge project that really lays out the Buddhist way, and it's just incredible. It has, like you're saying, essays on different things. It has definitions.
it works as a standard dictionary. It's organized A to Z with entries by various scholars. It covers all aspects of Buddhism, which, of course, Buddhism is such an international religion, but spreads across Asia and across the world, but primarily, Central Asia through Japan, China, Southeast Asia, India, and Tibet, Nepal. It all has different expressions, of course, as a religion with different deities, different names. I shouldn't say, because I haven't gone through A to Z, and I'm not a Buddhist scholar by a long shot, but it seems to be a major publication in the field. And it's such the study of Buddhism is so important, so critical, and Buddhism is such a scriptural religion. There's just so much writing within Buddhism, and then recitation and practice and sound, music, the sound of prayer and whatnot. So this is all covered. I mean, if one were to start out learning, you learn very quickly that there are books and books and books, and there are entries in here for each of those books of Buddhism, the sacred books, the text. Tibet versus India versus China versus Japan. Not versus, but compared with. Not to put the against in there, but I guess versus means compared to, I guess, in some way. It's really remarkable. Clearly, years and years of work were put into this.
Well, thank you for appearing on Ripco again.
Oh, you're welcome. Are we through? What happened? I'm ready to keep on going. I mean, once we got through accountability, I was ready to move on. Talk about accountability. Buddhism will.
Okay.